Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. This session is Discover YESTEIN, the innovative game changer in vegan protein, with Melissa Riddell of Neura. So welcome, Melissa, and she'll be presenting this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Melissa Riddell. I am from Neura. So if everybody does a quick turn, you'll see our booth right behind you. You can kind of wave at everybody that's there. The rest of our team is sitting right back here. So if you have questions afterwards, pricing, anything like that, you can always talk to them as well. I get to have the pleasure of telling you about YESTEIN, which is yeast protein. So how many here have heard of yeast protein, worked with it, know anything about yeast protein? One person. That does not make me feel good. But it makes me feel amazing because there's nothing but opportunity for everybody to learn about what is the most amazing protein I've ever used in my entire 20 years of working in R&D. I wish I had this protein 20 years ago. So we're going to talk about why it's a game changer. So really what you'll learn through this whole series is that yeast protein, especially YESTEIN, is nutritionally equivalent to whey protein. Has a PDCAS of 1, it has all 9 essential amino acids, and it does have your branch chain amino acids as well. So you have a very nutritional product here from that perspective. From a functional perspective, it's a low viscosity protein, so it allows for higher fortification in your finished products. It is fully sustainable. We'll have a quick slide that shows you how it's sustainable. It is upcycled certified, which is great for those consumer products that would like to have that upcycle logo on the front of their package. And it is fully bioavailable. So we have a lot of clinical studies that actually support the bioavailability of our yeast protein. But let's understand the market. Yeast protein is not familiar, as we see here. A lot of people don't know what it is necessarily, but it is growing on a global basis. So you'll notice that you're looking at 8.4% expected market CAGR. So you're going to have an increase in the market as other proteins start to have a challenge with supplying or sourcing. Cost could always be an issue as well with other vegan proteins. And with our protein compared to whey, you actually have a potential cost savings when your whey protein prices go up as well. So we'll go through all of that too. So sustainability does matter. We all know that from our consumer base, your consumer base. Why is sustainability so important? Because if we keep destroying our planet, there won't be anything left, right? So what we've done is we actually have a fully cyclical process. We have no waste. The wastewater from the process goes back into making the fertilizer, which then grows the sugar cane, and the sugar factory then processes the sugar to create molasses. The molasses at the time was being thrown away, and so we were able to take that molasses and use it as a feed source to feed the yeast, which is where we're generating and growing all of our yeast. And then it goes through the yeast protein process. So it's a very simple process as well. It's just a enzymatic hydrolysis, very similar and common practice to what you see with other vegan proteins. From a U.S. regulatory perspective, there are 2 ways in which this ingredient can be labeled. You have a lot of different labeling options per se, but from an FDA regulation perspective, you have baker's yeast protein that works under the 21 CFR 172.325. That's going to give you the option of using it as an additive at no maximum amount, as long as you're using it for nutritional purposes. It can also be considered, from a GRAS perspective, a baker's yeast extract. So that helps as well when you're looking at labeling if you're trying to, quote, hide your protein source. So a lot of functionality and flexibility on labeling. We have done quite a bit of research ourselves and with our partners on the clinical trials for what makes yeast protein, especially our YESTEIN, a nutritional functional product. And we've been really successful in those clinical studies and actually proving that YESTEIN is equivalent to whey. It does prevent muscle loss, it prevents muscle fatigue, it helps with muscle recovery. And we're more than happy to share all of the clinical studies that support that for you as well. Again, we did more studies, functional studies, to prove that it is a PDCAS of 1. We verified the BCAAs and the essential amino acids. So we're very confident that this is kind of the next protein that can either be used as a single protein or as a complementary protein to other proteins to either increase your protein content or maybe manipulate the functionality of the proteins. Maybe you don't want something very viscous, but you're still looking for something that has a little bit more protein content. This is an extremely functional ingredient as well. We have used it in every application you can possibly imagine. At IFT last year, we actually had a ice cream that was utilizing this product, a soft serve. In the back, after this presentation, we do have some YESTEIN made candy bars. They are protein candy bars, so it takes that out of that traditional, protein, just simple protein kind of bar, and it gives you something that goes in the confection space, but yet still increases your protein content. And I swear, if you could tell me it's not a Snickers bar, I'd be shocked, because it tastes just like a Snickers bar. But it is, again, used in all these various applications. Again, you can fortify at a really high fortification level with the protein because it is very low viscosity. It does help with flavor enhancement and flavor improvement. So I mentioned that it can be used with a complementary protein. I would say something like pea protein. How many people formulate with pea protein right now? And how many people love the taste of pea protein? Not very many people love the taste of pea protein. Yeast protein actually used in combination with the yeast protein at about a 10% to 30% usage level can actually reduce, if not completely eliminate, the beanie flavor profile that you get with pea protein. It also will remove the astringency that can come from extremely hydrolyzed proteins or other vegan proteins. So we have found with pulse proteins that you actually have a huge benefit of using this ingredient just for flavor improvement or flavor enhancement, even if you're not looking for it for anything else. For ready-to-drink applications, we've also found that a low viscosity is very desirable. Now you control your viscosity with your hydrocolloids. You don't have to do it with the protein, and it allows you to fortify as much as 50 grams in a serving because it is so low viscosity. We have also tested it in extruded puffs. We've tested this in chips, high-protein chips. We've made the crackers that you actually see on here. We've actually made those crackers to increase the protein content. And it works very well for like cereals, anything that's going to be extruded and puffed. What we learned, though, is that you cannot have a 100% yeast protein-based puffed ingredient. It does cause it to expand too much. It almost acts as a catalyst in the expansion process. So it works well in extrusion. One, it keeps the viscosity down, so you won't have any binding or any issues in your extruder. It keeps that viscosity and the flow very well through the process. But it will also, at around 5 to 8%, cause your expansion to be increased. So if you're using a pea protein and it's very dense, then you can add a little bit of the yeast protein in there. It will help expand that matrix a little bit more, and you'll get a softer bite, not something that's really, really hard. And I don't know how many people have eaten high protein crisps and they bite into it and they're like, great, I think I just cracked my tooth. That's a possibility. With yeast protein, you actually can reduce that hard bite. Save yourself on some dentist fees, I think. We have put this in meat alternatives as well. So YESTEIN meets meat alternatives is a very true statement. We have actually made textured vegetable protein utilizing yeast protein in combination with pea. We've also done it in combination with soy, and you get a really nice bite. You have wonderful water holding. It's an amazing emulsifier, and we'll go into the details as to why all of that is in the next section. So nutritional quality is extremely important in our proteins. So as I had mentioned, it is equivalent to whey. We also say it's complementary to whey proteins. So if you have a ready-to-drink or ready-to-mix any application where your main source of protein is a dairy-based protein, you can actually add yeast protein at a lower usage level. It's not something that you would call out on your front of package, but what it does is it guarantees you still maintain the nutritional quality you're looking for in your finished product with the protein content and the amino acids, but now you're able to control your cost because you don't have fluctuating costs with yeast protein because it is a fermented in a bioreactor. We're not growing this, we're not having to process it from that perspective. So that's where you have a very nice sustainable story as well. It is also fully digestible like whey protein, so that's where you get the equivalents from. It does contain 80% protein, so we're right there with the whey protein concentrates, and it is slow digesting. So there's a way to kind of use this in, I don't know, muscle recovery at the end of the night. You're going to go to bed, make a product with yeast protein in it, and now you get that nice slow digestion and recovery as you're sleeping. It's a nice way to look at it. It's also great for senior nutrition. As senior nutrition starts to become more and more popular in the marketplace, we're targeting our seniors a little bit more. We want them to be around a little bit longer with us. This helps with that muscle loss and that muscle recovery as well. So it helps the senior population maintain more strength and stability so they have less issues as they're moving around. We also did a study comparing this product to whey, and in that study what we found was that the YESTEIN does increase the lean muscle mass, and it is comparable to whey in that functionality. And so this is just showing how we actually were able to, the lean mass trunk is here. It's going to be the fat that you have around your waist. We were actually able to show that our YESTEIN was fairly equivalent to whey, if not a little bit better, in reducing that lean fat around your waist. And in that study, we also were able to show that the yeast protein demonstrated a reduction in the diastolic blood pressure. I'll be confident, we're not going to be out there and, hey, everybody, this is a cardiovascular protein. That's not what it is, but it tells us that we should expand into that research a little bit more and see what we can do from that perspective. But it does show that it does have lower fat, it does have lower carbs, things of that nature. We also look at the BCAA content. This is extremely important for muscle rebuild and muscle recovery. And you'll see that our YESTEIN actually has a slightly higher total of the 3 BCAAs than what you would see with soy or even a whey protein concentrate. So again, highly nutritional, highly valuable in that perspective. And then we look at the BCAAs a little bit more. So we do have some limiting amino acids as well that are very high naturally in yeast protein. So things like your lysine, your threonine, your methionine, these are your limiting amino acids as well. And so these, as you can see in the chart, are very high in those limiting amino acids, which are very low levels in most other vegan or plant-based proteins. So again, you don't have that issue with this type of a protein product. We did also study the digestibility. We did an in vitro digestibility to make sure that we're having that right bioavailability and it's comparable. And as you can see, we have a fairly comparable digestive value and PD-CAS and things of that nature as we start to look through all of the clinical studies that we're working with. So it is an extremely digestible protein. And then we look at the protein digestibility from a PD-CAS perspective. And as you can see, it's equivalent to whey, and it's slightly better than what you might find with soy. And it's a non-allergen. So you remove all of the allergens from dairy and soy with yeast. Yeast is our best friend. I don't know if everybody's got that message yet. Here's just an example of the study where we were able to show that the yeast protein actually does function in a slow digesting manner the same way that whey does. And so this is, again, a great example of how you can use this for dieters, you can use this for athletic folks, anybody in sports nutrition. We've also shown in a study, an animal study, that the yeast protein was successful in having amelioration of the protein. So that's prevention of loss and potential rebuild or restructure of that protein. What the mechanism of that is believed is that it's changing the microbiota in the gut. And so we've actually have this study that we will hopefully expand on further into human studies to show what is this effect in the microbiota and how are those various bacteria actually causing the improvement in the muscle strength and general just that prevention of loss, muscle loss as we age. So this is my funnest part of the speech that I get to give every day, is to talk about the more functional properties of yeast protein. So when we look at this, the surface morphology of any ingredient is going to have a huge impact on how it is solubilized, how it gets hydrated, things of that nature. As you can see on the far left side of that screen is YESTEIN. It is it's got a couple ridges and whatnot, but it's not as kind of wavy. It doesn't have gaps like you will see with the soy protein and the pea protein. So it's very difficult to some extent to potentially get this to hydrate as fast as what you might get with some of these other proteins. So processing can be another way to get around that. And we are able to show that in various different processing methods that we're using for all the various applications. And so we're going to kind of take a step back to our food science class, and we talk about the protein structure. Protein structure has a huge impact on the emulsification functionality, on water holding, and even solubility. And so really what we're working with mostly is a beta sheet protein structure. It is, however, the highest in the alpha helixes of all of the other proteins. So you'll actually have the ability to utilize this a little bit better than what you might with some of the other proteins just because of the surface morphology. So this shows you that in yeast protein that the beta sheet is the most abundant secondary structure. It is followed by the alpha helix, the random coil, and the beta turn. That's a whole lot of science, and we don't need to go into all that. But it's really important to understand that the beta sheet has a hydrophobic, which implies high hydrophobicity, which is actually really nice when working with it as an emulsifier, because it likes the oil. It doesn't necessarily want all of the water at once. So you have to process it a little bit to be able to do that. They often exist in the insoluble aggregate, so when you start to get into more of the protein structure, the beta sheet can ultimately have some effect on how it functions, but overall you're going to have substantial emulsification properties, which is great if you're using it in, a higher fat, higher protein based ready to drink or ready to mix. If you're looking to put it into a yogurt or some type of a non-dairy type of application, you actually may want a little bit more of that as well. It does contain the highest level of alpha helix, like I mentioned before, but because of that, you do not get a gel with this protein. So that's another reason why it's a fantastic protein for ready-to-drink applications. If you use dairy or whey in a ready-to-drink application, there's a tendency during processing or over time for the product to gel inside of the package. Very unpleasant for most people when they open and they pour it out and it just kind of gunks out. You'll never see that with yeast protein. Yeast protein will always give you a nice smooth texture because there's no gelling at all. So even in an acid environment. And then what it does is it also shows you that because of the structure, you're going to have a really nice emulsification like I mentioned before. So we'll kind of jump into that surface hydrophobicity. And as I had mentioned before, with the beta sheets and the hydrophobicity, that's where you get that emulsification property. And so this is just showing you what the HO value is. The higher the HO value is, the more emulsification property or stability that you'll get out of the product. And you'll see that yeast protein is equivalent or similar to your pea protein isolate, but substantially higher than soy, wheat gluten, and a peanut protein. So a lot of proteins out there that can be used, but not all of them have the same functionalities that you're going to get with the yeast protein. So fabulous emulsifier. From a viscosity perspective, I mentioned that it's extremely low viscosity. And so you'll notice on this chart, the line on the very, very bottom, that's yeast protein. So you can see that you can add a whole lot of yeast protein into a product, you can process it, and your viscosity is never going to go substantially or significantly up. And that's where you get that higher fortification level. I also love using YESTEIN in combination with other plant proteins that do contribute a lot of viscosity. Pea protein, if you're trying to make a ready to drink, it can be a little challenging unless you get a fully hydrolyzed protein. The more hydrolyzed your protein is, the worse the protein tastes. So here you can get a low viscosity protein without that hydrolysis, so you don't get that bitter and astringent flavor profile that you get with the other hydrolyzed proteins to try to get that same functionality. So if you want to reduce the viscosity of pea protein, add some yeast protein in it. It makes it taste better and it overall reduces the viscosity. So it's nice to use it complementary with even other vegan proteins. So this is just a great example to show you where you can use that high protein content, keep the viscosity really low, and it's very functional in ice creams, again, ready to drinks and ready to mixes. It is also extremely thermostable. So when we talk about putting this through processing, like I'd mentioned with a UHT process, you are really at that point potentially going to denature the protein and break it all down, and is it going to have the same functionality? We actually have an extremely thermostable protein with yeast protein. So you can process this under any type of condition for the most part, and you're going to maintain an intact protein where you're not going to lose that protein content. Protein solubility as well, it's fairly similar in its solubility to a lot of the other plant proteins. I wouldn't say you have a significant difference in this. And I'm trying to read my slide, it's really small. So the orange one is yeast protein. And you'll see that it's a little bit less, but not really. So you still have the functionality of being able to have water holding, and all of that comes in with your solubility as well. So I can say that if you go up to like 30% protein or 30 grams of protein in a serving and you have zero fat in your product, you might get a minor amount of graininess across the tongue. You put a little bit of fat into that formulation, it actually will coat the inside of your mouth and it takes away that graininess on the tongue. So that's a way to help improve mouthfeel, is not just with your hydrocolloids, but also with adding a little bit of fat into your finished product to help prevent some of that graininess. It also has a fairly decent water holding capacity. So when we talk about putting this into applications like breads, snack foods, anything of that nature, a bar, a protein bar, you're having to manage the moisture as much as possible to keep your shelf life long. You also don't want to lose moisture over time, and things like a protein bar, they get hard. How many people have had a protein bar? You have to put it on the dashboard so it gets hot just so you can eat it because it got so hard when it was sitting in your cabinet. You don't have to worry about that with yeast protein. You won't actually have it harden. And when we're finished here, I really offer, if you're not allergic to peanuts, to try our YESTEIN candy bar in the back, and you'll notice how nice and soft it is. And it's been around for a couple of months now, so you're not seeing that hardening happen over time. And then the bulk density is extremely important to consider as well. So the lighter your density is, or the lower your density is, the more you're going to actually have more material that you have to ship. In general, what you'll see is that yeast protein is fairly equivalent to pea. So from a freight or functionality perspective and flow properties, you have the opportunity to do something that you're already formulating with pea and just switch it out with yeast, and you won't have any issues in your manufacturing when you're trying to dump or when you're doing freight or things of that nature. These are all the various prototypes that we do have available at Neura if you're interested. We are happy to send these prototypes to you and work with you on any type of a formulation that you might have. We do have an R&D service available at a very low cost, and we do a lot of formulation work with different brands that are looking at launching with YESTEIN yeast protein in ready to mix. We do have a couple clients out there that have already launched with the YESTEIN product, and they're even putting the YESTEIN brand on the front of package, mostly because we actually have a very clean, neutral flavored yeast protein. We have two options. There's actually one that's a little bit more savory in flavor, and the higher you go up in the protein content, the more you'll start to taste the yeasty notes behind it. It's phenomenal in things like your snack foods. It's great in bars because you have so many flavors in bars, it kind of masks that a little bit. And it's great in any type of a savory application. We've actually used this in an instant pumpkin soup that you just literally add water, let it sit, it hydrates, and you can drink the soup. It's so good. You don't actually have to scoop it out. So all of these are available. If you are interested, please visit our team in the back, and they'll get your information and send you all the samples you could possibly eat made with YESTEIN. So are there any quick questions? I have 5 minutes. If you don't want to ask a question here, you can always come to the booth behind you and ask our team any questions you have, but I'll open that up to anybody. No, come on. I can't be that great of an educator up here. Somebody has a question? No? All right. Well, if you think of one, by all means, please come visit our team. If you're interested in samples of the YESTEIN or any of the prototypes or both, by all means, ask. We're happy to send that to everybody. So enjoy the rest of your show, and thanks for coming.